Hey everyone, welcome to Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter. We are reading through the Bible in 1 year, 365 days. I'm using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, and you can find that at oneyearbibleonline.com. You would go online, you would find their reading plans, download a chronological reading plan, and read from there. The reason that I am doing this chronologically is because I feel like you get a better sense of who God is. We're reading through the Bible cover to cover, and chronologically you get the historical understanding of what happened, when, why, how, right, all throughout God's plan, to see how his plan really fills out and then how we fit into that plan. And so I think that you can really see a lot of imagery through this when you do it chronologically. Today we are in the book of Proverbs. So today's date is it is June 1st. I do this all the time. My dates are always messed up. Today is June 1st, first day of June. We are in Proverbs still, and we are day 153, Proverbs 17 through 19. So by this point, we're like, I don't know, I want to say like 4 or 5 days into these Proverbs of just like these little snippet bits of wisdom. And we've got a couple of days left of these, so I'm hoping you're sticking in there. This is kind of what I say at the middle of every book is if you are sticking with it, I know it's getting tough at this point. I know that you're probably struggling a little bit to maintain interest in what it is that you're reading. But I ask you, stick with it. You will be so happy when you're done that you stuck with it through the entire thing. And then next time when you go back and read it again, it's going to filter through so much better and you're going to have a greater understanding. So the book of Proverbs is written by King Solomon. King Solomon is probably, I always kind of want to use it as a caveat because I'm sure some people are going to say it's not true, probably the wisest man that ever lived. He is the son of King David, and he is currently the ruler over the kingdom of Israel, which makes up the nation of Israel, plus some other areas that his father David conquered. He's living in a time of peace. He is married, he has children, he's running a kingdom, he built the temple, he built the palace, he built his wife's Pharaoh's daughter. And so he has lived a life up to this point because when he was king, he became king relatively young, asked for wisdom from the Lord. The Lord provided him wisdom in abundance to the point where everybody around that area was coming to him for guidance. They were coming to him for wisdom, for guidance, for trade, right? So he was sort of like, in some ways, the center of the universe at that time. And so everyone was going to him. And then, so what he did is he spoke a lot of Proverbs, and he also it looks like he directly had conversations with his sons. And then somebody put it together into a book and kind of put it all together so then the rest of the people could read it and get this wisdom. So this was initially it looks like it was for his sons, and then probably for his kingdom. And now it's for the rest of us as well. So some of these things, anyone is going to read and go, of course, this makes the most sense, right? So there's some beauty to that we can all recognize that there's wisdom in here, right? So wisdom would be somebody that works. That if you're not a sluggard, then you're wise, right? So that's kind of an easy one. One of the difficulties, I think, is really coming down to, as you're reading this, I think most of us would think we were the wise. And so I think that this is somewhere that we can start prodding and poking to see if we are the ones that are living in a wise way or if we are the ones that actually need wisdom. And so one of my easy ones is that, of course, I would want to teach this to my children because my children are young, they're growing up, and they need to learn wisdom and they need to learn discipline. And so these are a great way to do that. But as an adult, it's probably a little bit harder to understand. That you need wisdom, right? That you're still growing and you're still trying to learn to be closer to the Lord and have a greater understanding in who he is and the way in which he wants you to live, Solomon is a follower of the Lord. And so these bits of wisdom are wisdom for the way that the Lord wants his people to live. I hope that helps before you dive into all of these pieces of wisdom. I hope it helps to understand that you're not just supposed to be going like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right? Like, or just brushing past it. It's really trying to figure out how that fits into your life. If you are one of the ones that are wise, or if you need a little bit of readjustment, right? If you're headed a little bit off the path, if even you're 1 degree off, after a long time, that 1 degree becomes way off, right? So it doesn't stay straight down the line. So we got to bring ourselves right back down to the center of God's wisdom. So we're starting in Proverbs 17. And the way I've been rolling for the past few days is I'm just going to pick out a few that really hit me, that are eye-opening to me, and I'm just going to talk about them a little bit. Uh, for the listener or the reader that's read before, I would love to hear what stood out to you guys, what really hit on you. And of course, I think it's important to understand why they hit you, right? So like why they hit you different than they hit me. This is personal for me, and I'm hoping it gets personal for you. So, all right, so starting in 17, verse 2, it says, a prudent servant, as soon as I put it down, it starts getting windy. A prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son and will share the inheritance as one of the family. So this prudent servant, and this is for us as a servant in our life. So this is a very literal thing in that time. Somebody serves in someone's house. That's mostly not true where we live, although it could be somewhat true, but not necessarily, right? We mostly are servants in our jobs, right? So maybe I'm not a servant in my home, although I would say I am, because I do a lot of the servant type work. I take care of the kids and all that. But you're a servant, right, in your job. I'm a servant where I work in my school. And so a prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son. So even if somebody is bad, right, like even if somebody below you, whatever it is bad, if you're prudent, then you share in the inheritance as if you're one of the family. And so there's good to be gained from it, even if there's disgrace around you, right? Even if you're frustrated with the way that people around you are behaving and you recognize that they're not following the ways of the Lord, right? So you just want to be prudent anyway, no matter what. Verse 5, whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker, and whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. This is a call out really to not be cruel. Like it's easy to fall into this trap, and it's mostly easy to be like, I'm just joking, I'm just kidding. And I know that in some ways I take myself a little more seriously now that I'm the age I am, and how much I love the Lord and I want to follow the Lord. I'm a little more serious and maybe not as fun, a little bit less gossipy, hopefully a lot less gossipy, but because these things are really not good for us. So it's not good to show contempt or to mock anybody. And really what we're doing is we're showing contempt for the Lord, because these are the Lord's people. And so we shouldn't be mocking anyone or gloating over any disaster or wishing any disaster on anyone. We shouldn't be doing any of those things. Verse 6, I just want to point out because I actually found it confusing when I read it the first time. So I'm going to read it out loud. It says, children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. And the reason I wanted to point this out, because first of all, I found it confusing. And second of all, I've been discussing the idea of pride, and then we see the word pride in here, and I got just a little confused. And so I wanted to hit on a couple of different things. I had to go in a couple of different versions to have a better understanding of what it says. So children's children, which are grandchildren, are a crown or splendid to the older. So in other words, it's great to have grandkids. Like I feel like just write it that way. But it's great to have grandkids. And I'm going to say that's true for most people I know as grandparents. They are so thrilled to have grandchildren. And they just want to show their grandchildren off to everybody, right? So they're just so excited about grandchildren. Grandchildren is a blessing because you actually don't have to care for them in your home all the time. And you can sort of just enjoy them as they are and then send them back to their parents, right? And then this second version, or the second verse in that, is it says, and then parents are the pride of their children. And that's actually not, it's a little bit different than that. It's fathers, it's not parents. So that's changed a little bit. So it's fathers are the beauty of their children. And really it's a matter of being a good parent to the children. So this isn't necessarily, anyway, I just wanted to take some of the confusion out of this. And I'm hoping that maybe it took the confusion out, depending on what version you have. All right, verse 9, whoever would foster love covers an offense, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. And so, in other words, don't gossip. And I'm kind of going back to, in this verse 5, the same thing, right? Like coming along this idea of not talking about people behind their backs, not being cruel to people that are different or what you consider less than. Or if somebody hurts somebody else, you cover that offense in love instead of fostering over it by telling other people all about the offense. Same thing in verse 14, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So it's actually making a hole. I look at what breaching was. So it's making a hole in a dam. Starting a quarrel is like making a hole in a dam. So imagine you're holding up all this water and then you crack a hole in it. What's going to happen? The pressure is going to build and build and build and build, and then everything's going to explode. And so, sorry, going back to this. And that's what starting a quarrel is like. So starting a fight, like I joke sometimes to my husband. My husband likes to pick, and I always say, "Don't poke the bear," because there's something in it, right? Like, don't be that person who pokes and pokes and pokes, and then somebody explodes, and you go, "What? I was just messing around." That's actually harmful, and it's hurtful to the person that you're doing it to, right? And so I know there's something in our nature that sometimes we like to poke at people, but it's not nice. It's cruel. All right, verse 19, whoever loves a quarrel loves sin. Whoever builds a high gate invites destruction. So stop fighting and stop quarreling. Be watchful of your anger. These seem to be all the ones that I'm pointing out in this entire chapter. And then in verse 28, I have, even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. And what I noticed is, as I was doing these chapters, for me, the theme kind of kept with being prudent, being gentle, being quiet, not quarreling, right? So like sitting back and listening, right? And not jumping the gun, processing things before we push forward. These seem to be all the things that really stood out to me that I think that Solomon is saying in these chapters. So if we move on to chapter 18, I have in verse 5, it's not good to be partial to the wicked and so deprive the innocent of justice. Partiality in general is not good. So if we are partial to those who are similar to us, those who we know, any of those things, we just need to be really careful of those, because in a lot of ways we can deprive the innocent of justice only because of our partiality, right? So we look at, unfortunately, a lot of things are going down right now in churches. And also, unfortunately, a lot of times it is the leaders of the church. So it might be the head elders or pastors or the people that run the church, like whatever it might be. It's usually some kind of head leader. And the reality is so many of us are partial to that leader, because that's why we're there. We're there and we're listening to what they have to say, and we're just even in some ways I want to be like, oh, it's just exciting and it's really good, and that's true in some ways. But in other ways, like, we're really opening ourselves up to the word of the Lord when we hear these preachers speaking the word of God. We're encouraged, we're convicted, right? All these Christian words that say we want to change our life because of this. And so that makes us partial in a way, right? And so when we hear of wrongdoing, we aren't really siding with a person we don't know, but we're siding with a person that we know. And sometimes it's to our detriment. And so we need to be careful in general about partiality in anything that we do. We need to, again, sit back and listen and take everything in, right? And focus on that before we make any kind of judgments. Moving on to this 6, 7, and 8, I think goes to following 13, 14, 21, right? And then it also goes back to some of these other verses in the prior chapter, 19, 14, right? Because again, this is all about just sitting back. This is about the tongue, right? And what the tongue does. So it says, the lips of the fool bring them strife. So if you're spitting stuff out, you're being foolish, and that brings strife. And their mouths invite a beating, which is pretty brutal. Like, again, hearing some of these, the way these guys talk, like they don't mess around. They don't pull punches. And so they say, the lips of a fool bring strife, and their mouths invite a beating. So if you're sharp-tongued and saying all these nasty things, you're just inviting somebody to punch you. The mouths of fools are their undoing, and their lips are a snare to their very lies. Everything you say affects the way that you live. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. So when you gossip with somebody, that feeds them, and they go down and they kind of soak on it and they sit on it, right? They stew in it. Sometimes they go out and they tell other people about it. These are all things that we shouldn't be doing. Verse 13, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. And then go dropping down to verse 21, the tongue has the power of life and death, right? So being careful of what you say. It's got power. What you say has power. First of all, over you, because it comes from inside here, right? You're not just spitting things out. Everyone's like, oh, well, I just didn't think about it first. We're supposed to. So that's not an excuse, right? And that's coming directly from here. So whatever's in here is just falling out of your mouth and you're not thinking about it first. It has power over life and death. And those who love it will eat its fruit. So those who love like all that stuff you talk about, like they're going to eat its fruit. This is not good for you or good for anybody around you. I want to move back up to verse 14 because now I'm moving on to something just a little bit different. Verse 14 says, the human spirit can endure in sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear, right? So if you're sick, people can endure that. Matters of health, people can endure and they can work through and they can have people around them and supporting them. But if you crush your spirit, or if your spirit has been crushed, that's kind of an unbearable weight. If I don't know if you guys remember this, and I'm saying this as if I'm like speaking to somebody, but I don't know if you guys remember this expression. I'm old enough that we said this all the time. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you. And I got taught that all through my life. And that was a statement of wisdom when I was younger. And I'm not saying there's not some bearing to it, because what they would say is like physical beatings, they would leave bruises. But name calling, like big deal. However, if you think on it, I would guess, maybe not all of you, but I'm going to guess almost all of you can probably think back on some time in kindergarten or first grade or when you were 3 or when you were 7, and you can remember that moment where somebody said something so cruel to you and it changed something in your life, right? So it was that moment where you said, I'm no longer going to, whatever that might be. I'm no longer going to go to parties. I'm no longer going to hang out with people that look or act like this. I'm no longer going to say these things anymore. I'm no longer going to dress that way, right? So like, I'm sure there was a moment in your life that someone said something that crushed you. And so you can be the person that go, yeah, somebody crushed my spirit. That's not what this lesson is for. This lesson is not really necessarily for the victim. The lesson is for the perpetrator. And so and all of us have also perpetrated, right? So all of us have been victims of this situation, and all of us have perpetrated this situation. So the call is to not continue to be that perpetrator. Here we go. Before you speak, sit back. Before your tongue says something that it shouldn't say, sit back, think on it, be in prayer about it to God, right? Before you just kind of shout back at anybody. All right, then finishing with this final chapter, it's 19. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? So if you desire something, and a perfect example actually was me and my one student that I'm with today. And my student wanted so bad for me to tell me she did something great. She was really great, and I was really excited. And I said, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. You're getting 10 extra points today. Like, that was just so great. I'm so excited. And she did it unbidden. She didn't ask anybody first. She just did it. And it showed some internal nature in her that was really, really good. And I was really excited. And I said, I can't wait to tell our head teacher what you did. It was really great. So we get back to the room, and no sooner did we get back to the room than she was misbehaving again. And so she said, tell the teacher, tell the teacher, tell the teacher. And I wanted to wait because the story was so good. I wanted her to get to where she was getting first. And then the reward was going to be that I told this story, and that the teacher was going to be really excited that she had heard this story from her. So I wanted like a delayed gratification. I wanted her to grow in that way, that yes, I'm going to tell her that story, and yes, she's going to recognize it. But let's follow through on what we're supposed to do first. And then we're going to have an extra reward at the end and get that story. And she was so hasty. It was literally all she could think about. And so instead, she skipped the next class in order to tell that story, right? And then in doing that, she lost half of the points that she was given because she was so hasty in what she did. And now this is a young girl, right? And so obviously, discipline, training, we're learning new things. But we do this a lot too. We have this idea that we don't want delayed gratification. What we want, and we want it now. But how many times have you wanted something, and then first, no sooner do you get it than you don't care anymore. But second, the wait may tell you to go, you know what? I really didn't want that in the first place, right? So there's some wisdom. as if this wasn't a brilliant word, there's some wisdom in the waiting. So obviously that's what Solomon is saying. There's some wisdom in the waiting. Don't be hasty. So verse 3, it says, a person's own folly leads to their ruin, yet the heart rages against the Lord. We do stuff all the time that leads to destruction. We make bad choices all the time. Things happen. And then we go, how dare you, Lord, do that to me? You're not good. You didn't give me what I wanted. You didn't give me what I desired. And I think we need to be, obviously, I feel like I say this, I've been saying this all through Proverbs, to be careful of that, to not punish the Lord for our shortcomings. The Lord is just. It doesn't always feel like it because we always think we're right, which is something I've talked about in some of the past Proverbs. And so we have to be conscious and aware that the Lord is just in what he does, or the world is a broken world because of what humans did, and therefore bad things happen because of that. And not to blame the Lord, because all the good things actually come from him. So whether it be wisdom or financial freedom or good relationships, right? Whatever those things might be, those are all good things that are from the Lord. And not to blame him. Verse 11, it says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. This falls in line with a lot of the same things I've been saying. Sit back, listen, hear before you react to anything. And then in verse 19, a hot-tempered person must pay the penalty. If you rescue them, you'll have to do it again. So if you're watching a hot-tempered person, do not rescue them as much as you want to. And, anytime it comes to my kids, I want to rescue them. I want to save them from any punishments they're going to have. And yet it's just going to breed this same behaviors over and over and over again. And so what we need to do is we need to let them pay the penalty as much as it hurts to do so. All right, coming to the end here. It says verse 25. I'm going to do verse 25 and 29 because I feel like they kind of run into each other. Flog a mocker, and the simple will learn prudence. So flogging is beating. So if you flog someone, they're going to learn prudence. So there's learning to be had with discipline. Rebuke the discerning, and they're going to gain knowledge. So the simple, unfortunately, need more of a physical punishment, whereas the discerning, you can just have a discussion with them, rebuke them, let them know they're going the wrong way, and then they're going to gain knowledge. And so it's just, I think eventually you gain more prudence, and then the things just become rebukes after that. And then in verse 29, it says, penalties are prepared for the mockers and beatings for the back of fools. We don't really do this anymore. Like, we don't really beat people. I know it's in bad form. And again, I'm going to mostly talk about here because I don't think that's always true in other countries, but it's definitely true here. And so that's not really something that we do. Some things can be more stern than other things. And so maybe taking it in that way, that like a gentle rebuke is good for the discerning, where a harsher rebuke would be for someone who's not learning or continues to not listen, not learn, and not follow discipline. So that's it for today. And I hope that you were able to read it. I hope you were able to glean some information out of it. And again, really continue just to check your heart through Proverbs. Check your heart, check your behaviors and how you are treating other people. So guys, if this was a blessing, I want you to hit the like button, share it, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications if you haven't done that yet. And I will see you guys tomorrow. But in the meantime, keep reading.